we're going to look at the sine graph over the interval negative 2 pi to positive 2 pi. How far around the circle is 2 pi? 360, that's one time around the circle, right? How many quadrants do I go through if I go around once around the circle? 4 quadrants. So I'm going to divide it up into the 4 quadrants. We will always express this in radians. So I'll divide in half. I've got pi. That'll be half the way around the circle. What would be half of pi? Pi over 2. So do you remember that this is 0, this is pi over 2, this is pi, this is 0 or 2 pi, and then this spot, you remember what we call that? 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. So those are the angles that we are using in this situation. So I've got pi over 2, I've got pi, and I've got 3 pi over 2. And I'll draw the negative ones as well. Negative pi, negative 3 pi over 2, and negative pi over 2. Now, if you remember, when we went through all those terminal points, we came up with different values. We came up with 0. We came up with 1/2. We came up with the square root of 3 over 2. Came up with the square root of 2 over 2. Came up with 1. Remember, those were the common values we came up with? We said that, 1/2 is 0.5, square root of 3 over 2 is 0.86, square root of 2 over 2 is 0.707, and 1 is obviously 1. So these are the decimals. So what was the largest value that sine was able to be? 1. Anybody know what the smallest value is that sine can be? Remember, sine can also be negative, so therefore, negative 1. And now we're basically done. Our maximum value is 1. Our minimum value is negative 1. We'll talk about amplitude and period here in a second. If you reference my circle, at 0 degrees, sine is the y value. What's the sine of 0 degrees or 0 radians? It is 0. If you move over to pi over 2, what's the sine of pi over 2? What's the y value of pi over 2? The y value. What's this coordinate right here? 1, 0, right? What's this coordinate? 0, 1. What's this coordinate? What's this coordinate? Good. So this is at 0 radians. This is at pi over 2 radians. This is at pi radians. This is at 3 pi over 2 radians. And then all the way around would be 2 pi radians. So again, sine, we are looking at the y value. What is the y value of pi over 2? 1. So at pi over 2, I have a value of 1. What is the y value at pi? 0. What is the y value at 3 pi over 2? And what is the y value at 2 pi? Let's go backwards. Negative pi over 2. That would be moving like this. What's the y value at negative pi over 2? Negative 1. What's the y value at negative pi? What's the y value at negative 3 pi over 2? And what's the y value at negative 2 pi? Here's the shape you get. What shape does that make? How would you describe it? A wave. In fact, did you know that light travels as a wave? Did you know sound travels as a wave? And so that's pretty important. There's a lot of things in our life that are modeled by sine waves. They're called sinusoids. And we can actually model our voice as a sine wave. Now, as my voice increases in volume, the amplitude goes up. The amplitude is the difference between the top and the middle. So the amplitude is 1. It goes 1 unit up and 1 unit down. And the period is how often it repeats itself. So you can see that we have 2 full cycles here. The green part would represent 1 cycle of the sine graph. After that, it will continue to repeat itself. So I can actually grab that and put it over here. You can see I have the same thing. Okay? That's 1 cycle. We have 2 showing up here. So it repeats itself every 2 pi. Let's move on to the cosine graph. The cosine graph, again, we will look over the interval of negative 2 pi to positive 2 pi. It again has a max value of 1 and a minimum value of negative 1. It has an amplitude of 1 and a period of 2 pi. I'll draw these out again so we can get it. Instead of the y value, what is cosine? The x value. So this is 0, this is pi over 2, this is pi, this is 3 pi over 2, and this is 2 pi. So what I'm doing is I'm literally plugging in values. I have x values, I have y values, okay? I have the structure of my graph all set up. We'll let you finish that off. I'm going to choose my first x value to be 0, okay? If you take the cosine of 0, is cosine the x value or the y value? X. So the cosine of 0 is 1. So 0, 1 is my first point. Now I'll plug in pi over 2. I'm going to take the cosine of pi over 2. Cosine is the x value, so cosine of pi over 2 is 0. Now I'll take the cosine of pi. Again, cosine is the x value, so the cosine of pi is -1. Can you guess where it's going to go next? It's going to go to 0. Can you guess where it's going to go next? Up to 1. Can you see the pattern? It goes back and forth between 1 and -1, and in between it has to cross over the middle. So here it's going to cross over 0. At negative pi, where is it going to be? It's going to be down -1. Where's it going to be at negative 3 pi over 2? And where's it going to be at negative 2 pi? the cosine of 0, 0 degrees or 0 radians. Cosine is the x value. And the x value is 1. Is that better? So you can see I get almost the same graph, don't I? How is this graph different? Yeah, you can see it starts at the top. If you shift it, it ends up being the same graph, doesn't it? So they're very, very, very similar. They have the same amplitude, same period, same everything else. We are only today going to focus on shifting the amplitude and the period. When you see an equation of the form y equals a sine of bx, the amplitude is the absolute value of a. Whatever the absolute value of a is, that's what the amplitude is. If it's cosine, the amplitude is still the absolute value of a. A period is how often it repeats itself. To find the period, you take 2 pi, which is its normal period, but then you divide it by whatever the b value is. B is whatever number sits in front of x. And as long as you can use those two formulas today, you're going to be able to do most of your assignment. Flip it over, and let's try to find amplitude and period. Amplitude is the absolute value of the number in front of sine. What is the amplitude for this one right here? 1. Number 2, what's the amplitude going to be? Number 3. Number 4. 5. The amplitude will always be positive because it's the absolute value. 6. Okay, we'll do 7, 8, and 9 in a second. But so that's all you have to do to identify the amplitude. Not too tough, huh? Amplitude is very straightforward. Desiree and Ricky, I have notes for you guys right here. Let's find the period. To find the period, I take 2 pi and I divide it by what? Divided by the number in front of x. So 2 pi divided by 4. How can you simplify 2 pi divided by 4? Pi over 2. For the second one, I have the period is 2 pi divided by 5. Can we simplify that? Nope, so it's just 2 pi over 5. For number 3, what's the number in front of x? So it's just 2 pi over 1, or 2 pi. How about for number 4? 2 pi. Number 5? Number 6? I won't ever give you a negative number. We'll always list the period as a positive value as well. Okay? So we'll just call it pi over 2. All right. We'll do each one individually. 7. What's the amplitude? What's different about the amplitude this time? Got a fraction. So we're going to take 2 pi over 1 and divide it by 2 over 3. I can't divide fractions, so instead of dividing, I multiply by. And we multiply by reciprocal. What do you get? 3 pi. Yep, very good. How about the amplitude for number 8? Amplitude is 4. Period? Yep, very good. Amplitude for 9? Period? Yep, pi. We'll call it, we'll just divide by the positive. So can you find the amplitude and the period today? Then the only other thing we want to do is we'll just put them on the graph. Here we go. Let's look at, we'll do this example right here first. We'll call this Example A, B, then we'll do C, then we'll do D. You will always start by identifying the amplitude and the period. What is the amplitude for letter A? 3. What is the period? 2 pi. And here's what you will do. On your graph, you will mark out the amplitude and you will mark out the period. Into how many parts should I divide the period? 4. Why 4? Because there's 4 quadrants. So you divide 2 pi in half, you get pi. Divide pi in half, you get. Now, everybody always struggles with how to come up with this one. Count with me. 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. And you may say, well, that's easy. I remember that because that's what it always is. It won't always be that. Trust me. We just do the negatives on the other side. Okay, let's go to work. Are we graphing sine or cosine? Cosine. Will cosine start at the maximum or the minimum or the middle? It started up at the maximum, if you remember the graph. So it starts all the way up here at 3. And then where do you think it's going to go after that? At pi over 2, what do you think the height is going to be? Very good, it will be 0. Where will it go after that? To the bottom. And then back to the top. I'm going to do the other side as well. A negative pi over 2 will cross back over the middle before it bottoms out. And it'll go back to the middle before it gets to the maximum. And you can do your best to draw a nice cosine curve. And that's it. This is the third piece of what you have to do on your final exam, is sketch sine and cosine curves. So, find sine and cosine tangent values, solve triangles, and graph sine and cosine. Let's do the next one. Amplitude. 1, mark it. Period. Two pi. Mark it. Am I graphing sine or cosine? Sine. So I start at the maximum, the minimum, or the middle. I will start at the middle. Now, what do you notice about this sine graph that's different than the one that we sketched earlier? What does it have that's different about it? Has the negative sign in front. When you see something with a negative sign, what do you do to the graph? You flip it. So instead of going up, this one's going to go down. Where's it going to go after that? The middle, then, and then, middle. And it will repeat that cycle on the other side as well. You should always have a very nice flowing graph. And that's my sine graph. Anybody think they have a really good sine graph on their paper? Like they would want to show that off and have it like be the class model. Anybody have a really bad sine graph that they would like to display as, you know, this doesn't really look that pretty? Okay, Patrick's got one. All right, so try to make sure your sine graphs are looking good. Okay, let's piece this together and try these last two. Okay, we'll be done. Okay, amplitude. 4. Mark it off. Period. 2. There's no pi on this one. So it's just 2. Just 2 pi divided by pi is 2. How many parts do I divide it into? 4. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. Let's count. 1/2, 2/2, 3/2. Very good guess at 3/4. But remember, 3/4 is less than 1. So, yep, that's, no, a lot of people mess that up. Okay. Am I graphing sine or cosine? Sine. So am I going to start the max, the min, or the middle? The middle. And will I start by going up or will I start by going down? Start by going up because it's positive, so it's not going to be reflected. I could start laying out my dots for the max, the mins, and the middles. We'll do one more. Amplitude. 2. Period. Uh-oh. Two pi divided by what? What's the fraction? What's the number in front of x? There's a 1, and it's being divided by 3. So the fraction is 1/3. So I got to take 2 pi over 1 and divide it by 1/3. How do I divide those fractions? Times it by 3 over 1, and what do you get? 6 pi. Divide it up into 4 quadrants. What's half of 6 pi? 3 pi. What's half of 3 pi? 1.5 pi, or 3 pi over 2. Let's count by 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2, 6 pi over 2, 9 pi over 2. What would be after 9 pi over 2? 12 pi over 2, which is the same as 6 pi. See that? That's how you got it. You got to count to come up with that third. Okay. All right, go the other way. Again, we got negative 3 pi, negative 3 pi over 2, and negative 9 pi over 2. Got a max of 2. Oh boy, I'm graphing cosine. Cosine start at the max, the min, or the middle? The max, but it's got a negative in front. So instead of starting the max, it will do a vertical flip, and now it will start at the minimum, all the way at the bottom. Where will it go from the bottom? It has nowhere to go but up to 0, up to 2, and there you have it. So there's 4 nice examples. I have a worksheet for you. You will not receive an assignment on Monday or Tuesday. Your job will be to study for the final exam with your study guide and to do this worksheet. I will not collect this worksheet until our next test. Okay? So here you go.